Hey guys, real quick, in this episode, I'm going to talk about how if was a young renter earning as a household less than $150,000 per annum, how I would get onto the property ladder, how I would buy my first home, even though right now the bank is not lending me enough to buy the home that I really want.
Welcome to the Oz Property Investment Mastery Podcast. My name's PK and I help busy people build passive income by buying top 5% growth and cash flow property and build a portfolio using data without wasting months doing research, spending weekends at inspection or catching flights, or dropping $10,000 to $20,000 on buyer's agents every single time. So if you're confused, lack confidence, and just overwhelmed with all the information and marketing misinformation available online and don't know where to start, then this show is for you.
Let's say I'm in Melbourne, let's say I'm in Sydney, let's say I'm in Brisbane, and as a joint couple, my earnings are less than $150,000, give or take. And let's say I have like $70,000 saved up, and I'm looking around Melbourne and I'm like, where all my friends are or where I want to be living. I can't afford that. All those properties are going for more than $1 million or at least close to $1 million, and the bank is not going to lend me enough, and $70,000 isn't going to cut it either. And then let's say I'm in Sydney and I'm looking around, I'm like, okay, I worked really hard for this job, but the bank is not going to lend me $900,000 or $1 million. And even if they did, I only have $70,000 saved up. So how am I ever going to buy the home that I want to live in? Okay, let's say I'm in my mid 20s, I'm in my early 30s, maybe mid 30s. What am I to do? Like, even in Brisbane these days, it's so expensive. The house price average, including units and freestanding houses in Brisbane, is actually more than Melbourne. Let's say I'm a young aspirational couple. Once again, I want to buy something in Kelvin Grove, Paddington. I want to buy, heck, I'm okay to even buy down in Underwood or Springwood or somewhere like that. But everything is like at least $1 million that, my partner and I see. Let's say I'm in that situation, swap out for any other capital city, basically, except for maybe Darwin. Oh, how do I get onto the property ladder? I'm renting, and I think right now my mentality is that rent money is dead money. So I really want to get onto the property ladder. How do I do that? If I was in that exact position, okay, if I was in that exact position, which I was, by the way, many, many years ago, what I would do is I would take my $70,000, I would go to a mortgage broker and I'd ask that mortgage broker, how much is a bank going to lend me? Okay. A mortgage broker knows and has a relationship with, hopefully, the good ones do, 30 to 40 different lenders. Some lenders might say, like a big four bank, we're only going to let PK and his partner borrow $500,000. Another lender, maybe Macquarie, is going to say, we're going to let him buy something up to $800,000. Another lender, a second tier lender or a St. George or Bank West, these second tier lenders, they might say, we're going to let him buy something up to 1.1 million. Or another lender, maybe a third tier lender, is going to say, we're going to let PK borrow up to 1.5 million. These are just placeholder numbers, directional. It depends on a lot of things, of course. But let's say that's the reality. And the thing is that a lender is going to give you a loan based on the income that that loan generates for you. So a principal place of residence is not generating you any income because you live there. So generally you get a much lower loan amount. But if you buy an investment, then the lender is like, okay, well, the thing's probably not going to pay for itself just in the first 2 years or first few years, but ultimately it might. And it's giving income. So therefore, will allow PK to borrow more. Therefore, what I would do is I would use those funds, that $70,000 deposit, and depending on which lender I go with, I would use that to buy an investment property, not where I want to live, but where will grow in value. I will use 30, 35 data factors. I will invest in my learning. I'll look at data. And if I'm in Melbourne, I might think, hey, there are some regional areas of WA, I'm not talking mining towns, that could do really well. What if I pick something up there around 450,000, 400,000, 500,000? Or what about Bendigo, which is booming right now? Or what about Geelong, which is having its recovery cycle? Or, you know, Mildura, which is doing really well as well. Or I might think, you know what? There are some towns like Toowoomba up in Queensland that are doing really well. Or there are some regional centers in New South Wales like Wagga that are performing really well. Of course, I'm not saying to put a blindfold on and invest in these areas just because I'm mentioning them in this episode, but directionally, they're good ideas, right? And so even though I can't afford to buy my home in Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, if I choose one of these and many, many others like them, these locations, then that $60,000-$70,000 is gonna buy me a, let's say, a $400,000 property, $450,000 property, depending on the LVR that I go with, depending on how much loan the bank gives me, right? And we've already discussed how different banks are more amenable to giving bigger and bigger loans, depending on which broker you're going with and what your situation is. And so therefore, if I buy something for, let's say 450, and by the end of the year, let's say in 12 months time, that thing is gone up by 150,000 or even let's say 100,000, which, it's it's more likely to happen than not. Let's be realistic. You know, a place like Bendigo is not likely to rise by anything less than 50 or $100,000 in the next 12 months. Then that's $70,000 of deposit. I've bought a 400K house. Let's go say it's gone up to 550 on. You might say we can't buy anything for Bendigo and 400. Granted, let's just say 450, right? Or pick another location. Let's say 450. That goes up to 550 or 600, but in 12 months. Now I've got another 100, maybe $150,000 of equity, even less than 100 if you want to be more conservative. Now, once again, I go to my broker and I say, "Did I exhaust my borrowing capacity when you did that analysis for me that first time?" Maybe you didn't. Maybe instead of buying one property, you buy two investment properties, you diversify. One in Bendigo, one in Toowoomba, or one in somewhere in Geelong and one in somewhere in regional Queensland. Now you've got two properties that in 12 months' time have gone up, let's say $100,000 each. That's $200,000 of equity. Now, if you're a little bit patient, you can do this maybe one or two times more. So you might accumulate a portfolio of three to four properties. It might take you 3 years to do that. Of course, you're young, aspirational, maybe your income's going up as well steadily and surely, and therefore your borrowing capacity, or maybe you've switched from first tier to second tier to third tier lenders, paying a little bit of a higher interest rate, but they're giving you hundreds of thousands of dollars of additional borrowing capacity. And then in 3, maybe 4, maybe 5 years' time, that property you picked up in Bendigo for, let's say, 500,000 is now 750. That property you picked up in Toowoomba for 600 maybe is 750, 800. That property you picked up in Wagga for 450 or 550 is now 700 or 800 or more. There are going to be genuinely locations that go up 50% in the next 2 years. I almost guarantee it. In fact, I do guarantee it. There will be locations that do that. If you use data and survey the 15,000 suburbs and find the best ones, then in 3 to 5 years' time, guys, you will have a portfolio of, let's say, three, four, five properties that have now got, because all of them have done well, that might have up to $1 million of equity. Okay, and I'm not saying that you've done this because you want to be a property investor, but then you can sell these properties. I know. There is capital gains tax, but you do get the 50% discount, okay, when you sell. You pay your due tax. Paying tax is a good thing because it means you're making money. All right. People who don't make money don't pay tax. So if you're making money, that's a good thing. You're paying tax. All right. So you're maybe let's say you've made $1 million, or even be conservative, like $750,000 in 3 to 5 years' time. If you've not made across, two, three, four, five properties at least $750,000, $1 million, $1.25 million, like you're doing something wrong. Like you're doing something pretty wrong. Okay, so if you've learned property investment, you've become a master at it, which anyone can do within 3 to 5 hours a week over 1 or 2 months, then this should be your outcome. Let's say the average $1 million up in 3 to 5 years. You sell those properties down, yeah, you pay your capital gains tax. Okay, let's say you got 750 left, or on the up scenario, you've got 1.125 or $1.25 million left, or let's say $1 million left. That's another $1 million that you can now invest to buy your principal place of residence that you would not have had if you had not deployed the strategy of rent vesting, continuing to rent the whole time and investing. I know it sucks, delayed gratification, but it's the most successful people in the whole world. They they employ this principle of delayed gratification. Yep, you won't be the most popular at, barbecues or amongst your friend circles. They'll all be buying apartments, close to the city, something under seven, $800,000, and you'll be that chum still renting. They'll be looking down at you, frowning on you. Of course, you'll be accumulating investment properties in that whole time, and in 5 years' time, you're going to be the one who's able to buy that, that, let's say 600, 700, 800 square meter block, with land, with a backyard, with a house that your friends, not that this is a competition, but I'm just trying to resonate here, that your friends won't be able to afford because they didn't go down this investment pathway, right? This is what I would legit do if it was up to me. If I was not in a situation where I could afford the home that I really want to live in, I would rent vest. I would continue to rent. I'd use my savings because savings is going backwards in the bank otherwise with inflation gearing up. I would use my savings. I'd use my borrowing capacity. By the way, your borrowing capacity is also an asset. The ability to get money off the bank is an asset. Anyone who thinks good debt that increases your asset values is bad, they don't know how the rich work. The rich around the world, they try to get their hands on as much debt, good debt, as possible because they're clued up. They know where to use that money to invest. It's not like they'll start with millions of dollars or billions of dollars. They get there because they borrow as much as they can and then invest it wisely. And 10% gain on $1 million is 10% is better than 10% gain on $20,000. If you only have $20,000 in the bank, or $60,000 in the bank, or $70,000 in the bank, you can't really make a lot of money these days unless you time Bitcoin or something super well. But if you get your hands on good debt and you can control an asset worth $700,000, $1 million, a portfolio worth $1 or $2 million, even though that's not yours, it's technically the bank's. But as that rises in value, that equity is yours, and then you can pay off the debt. And that equity, $1, $2, $3 million, you would never have been able to get it had you not taken debt. So, for my advice to all of those of you who are renters, aspirational young people, let's say you're, Gen Y like I am, I would do this strategy because otherwise, the people who do in 4 or 5 years' time, they're the ones who are going to be buying their homes that they really want to live in, their dream homes. And you'll be wondering, how did they do it? Like, they're also an accountant, I'm an accountant. They're also an IT, and I'm an IT. They're also an engineer, and I'm an engineer. Like, we're the same, but how come they're living in the suburb that I want to live in, but I can't afford? What did they do different? Like, their income's the same as mine. It's not a competition between someone else's income and your income. In fact, it's not a competition at all, but rather, why be left behind from the pack when the smart young people, those under 30, under 40, maybe even under 45 these days with house prices the way they are, the smart people in this age category who can't yet build or afford their own home, their dream home, let's say, they are rent vesting. They're deploying two types of assets. Their deposit, and all you need is 60, 70, $80,000 to start, right? You don't need to be, have that much. And all you need to be able to do is afford, even if it's just one property. Okay, even if it's just one property. Let's say you buy one property for $50,000 investment property, and that doubles in the next 5 to 7 years. That's another $450,000 of equity that you would not have achieved had you not invested. Rather, you would have been trying to save to buy your own home. And let's be honest, can you save $450,000 in 3 to 5 or 5 to 7 years? Most people would say no, especially in this young category. So for me, it's a no brainer. This is exactly what I would do. I think a lot of people complain, oh, house prices are so unaffordable. And they are unaffordable for young people, but the smart young people, they're thinking laterally. They're chasing those affordable areas that are still affordable right now to be then able to afford the previously unaffordable house or home in the suburb where they ultimately really want to live. Hopefully this landed. Hopefully this brought you value. My name's PK. Hit the subscribe button, give it a like, and share it. Like the more you share this episode with someone in this boat, like you could actually really help them. Okay, you could actually genuinely allow them and enable them to buy their dream home in, let's say, 3, 5, 7 years time. I think that's wisdom worth sharing. It's not my wisdom. I'm just a conduit because I've done this myself. This is how I bought my first principal place of residence in the Gold Coast. My name's VK. Hit the subscribe button and give it a like. Thank you so much, guys. I appreciate you part of the community as always. Bye.